For 2 years, Alden accepted the official story. A bear had mauled and taken his father, Orville. He'd found the toppled hives and the massive paw prints himself, a grim scene that haunted his sleep. But when a park ranger's trail cam captures a bear carrying his father's veil, pristine and completely undamaged, a cold knot of doubt tightens in his gut. A bear mauls, it doesn't gently carry away trophies. What happens when a single, impossible photograph shatters the story you forced yourself to believe for the sake of peace? Stay with us as we follow a son's hunt for a truth that's far more dangerous than any wild animal. The buzzing had been the soundtrack to Alden's life. From the time he was a boy, the gentle hum of honeybees was a constant, a warm, living sound that meant his father was nearby. Orville Freeman lived for his bees. They weren't just livestock. They were his partners, his passion. For 2 years, that sound had been replaced by a hollow silence that echoed across the fields of their family farm. The silence was a constant reminder of the day everything went wrong. Alden had been the one to find the scene. The overturned Langstroth hives, the splintered wood and scattered frames, the sticky sweet smell of honey soaked into the earth, and the tracks. Huge, deep impressions from a black bear, leading from the apiary toward the dense woods bordering their property. There was no sign of his father other than a single, torn glove lying near the chaos. The search party had combed the woods for a week, but they never found Orville. The sheriff concluded it was a tragic, yet straightforward, animal attack. A beekeeper surprised a bear, and the bear did what bears do. Alden had accepted it. He had to. The evidence was right there in the mud and the splintered wood. He packed up his father's personal belongings, shut the door to his office, and tried to keep the farm running, the silence of the empty apiary a heavy weight on his shoulders. Life settled into a sad, quiet routine. Then came the phone call that ripped the fragile scar tissue off the wound. It was Maeve, a park ranger who had known his father for years. She sounded hesitant, almost apologetic. "Alden, I know this might be nothing," she started, her voice crackling slightly over the phone, "but I was pulling cards from some trail cams way up in the north sector, and, well, you should probably just come see this." The north sector was a good 10 miles from their farm, a rugged, rarely trafficked wilderness. Alden's heart hammered against his ribs as he drove to the ranger station, a familiar sense of dread mixing with something he hadn't felt in 2 years: curiosity. Maeve led him to her office, the scent of pine and old paper hanging in the air. Without a word, she turned her computer monitor toward him. The photo was time-stamped just the day before. It showed a large, healthy black bear making its way through a thicket of ferns. It wasn't the bear that made Alden's breath catch in his throat. It was what the bear was carrying. Held gently in its massive jaws, as if it were a cub, was a beekeeper's veil. It was white, with its distinctive black mesh and striped brim. On the side, Alden could just make out the small, hand-stitched leather patch his father had sewn on years ago after a tear. The veil wasn't ripped, it wasn't stained with blood, it was just there, intact. "A bear wouldn't do that," Alden whispered, his voice hoarse. "If it had attacked him, that veil would be in shreds. The whole suit would be." Maeve nodded slowly. "That's what I thought," she said. "Animals don't take souvenirs, Alden." A cold, hard certainty began to form in Alden's mind, pushing aside 2 years of reluctant acceptance. The official story was a lie. Something else had happened to his father out there. He looked at Maeve, a new, fierce determination in his eyes. "I need a copy of that photo," he said, "and I need to know the exact coordinates of that camera." Alden drove home in a daze, the printed-out photo sitting on the passenger seat like a ghost. For the first time in 24 months, he walked to his father's old office and turned the key in the lock. The room was just as Orville had left it, covered in a thin layer of dust. The air was stale, thick with the scent of beeswax and old books. Alden had avoided this room, avoided the painful memories it held. Now it was a crime scene. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew he had to start somewhere. He bypassed the sentimental items, the photos, the old awards from honey competitions, and went straight for the filing cabinet. He pulled open the drawer labeled Business, his hands moving with a sense of urgent purpose. He started sifting through invoices, tax forms, and supply orders from the months leading up to his father's disappearance. It was all mundane, ordinary stuff. Then he found a folder tucked in the very back, labeled simply H&H. Inside was a draft of a contract and a long chain of emails. Alden's eyes widened as he read. His father had been in the final stages of negotiating a massive, exclusive contract with a high-end organic grocery chain called Harvest and Hearth. They wanted to buy his entire stock of Manuka-style honey. It was a notoriously difficult and valuable honey to produce, with powerful medicinal properties. Orville had spent years perfecting a method to encourage his bees to pollinate the wild tea trees that grew in the region, creating a honey that rivaled the best from New Zealand. This contract wasn't just a big deal. It was a life-changing one. It would have made his father's small operation the most successful apiary in the state, and it would have crushed his competition. The name came to Alden's mind almost instantly: Barrett Finch. Barrett was the other major beekeeper in the county, a man with a sprawling farm and an ambition that was only matched by his short temper. Alden remembered his father complaining about Barrett trying to scout his property, likely looking for the tea tree groves. In a separate notebook, Orville had jotted down notes about his process. Tucked into the back was a page where he'd written, Barrett asked about the H&H deal, told him it wasn't confirmed. He seemed angry, said I got lucky. There's no luck in this, only hard work. Alden's hands trembled. It was a motive, a powerful one. He had to see Barrett, had to look the man in the eye. He found Barrett Finch out by his shiny, new processing barn, a structure Orville could have only dreamed of owning. Barrett looked surprised to see him, his face hardening slightly. Alden, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Long time. What can I do for you? Alden tried to keep his voice steady. I was just hoping to ask you a few things about my father. Barrett's expression soured. Look, what happened to your dad was a tragedy, a real shame, but it was 2 years ago. Alden held up his phone and showed him the picture of the bear and the veil. A park ranger found this yesterday. Barrett squinted at the screen, then shrugged, a little too casually. Huh. Weird. Bears are unpredictable animals. The dismissal was too quick, too practiced. You and he were competitors, Alden pushed. I found some notes about the Harvest and Hearth contract he was about to sign. The change in Barrett's demeanor was immediate. A flicker of something dark and cold passed through his eyes. Your father was a good beekeeper, but he was sentimental, Barrett said, his voice dropping. He got lucky with that honey. I won that contract fair and square after he was gone. My methods are more efficient anyway. Barrett took a step closer, his posture suddenly intimidating. I'd let it go if I were you, son. Raking up the past won't bring him back. Some things are better left buried. The veiled threat hung in the air between them. Alden didn't need to hear another word. He knew. He just had no idea how to prove it. Driving away from Barrett's farm, Alden's mind was racing. Barrett's hostility had all but confirmed his involvement, but it was just a feeling. He had no evidence, nothing but a strange photo and a dead man's contract. How could he possibly link Barrett to his father's disappearance? He thought back to conversations he'd had with his father, snippets of shop talk and complaints. Orville had always prided himself on using organic, bee-safe products. He often criticized Barrett for cutting corners. Finch would buy his supplies from a diesel mechanic if it saved him a nickel, he'd once joked. The memory sparked an idea. Proper beekeeping suppliers were a small, specialized community, but industrial suppliers sold all sorts of things to the public. If Barrett needed something he didn't want traced back to him, he wouldn't buy it from a bee supply store. Back in his father's dusty office, Alden spent the next several hours glued to the computer. He searched for public business records, cross-referencing suppliers for Finch apiaries. It was a long shot, a desperate search for a needle in a digital haystack. He scoured databases of chemical distributors, agricultural suppliers, and industrial cleaning companies. Hours bled together. His eyes burned from staring at the screen. Just as he was about to give up, he found it. On the website of a regional industrial chemical supplier, he found a public access portal for past commercial invoices. He typed in Finch apiaries. A single invoice popped up, dated 3 days before Orville vanished. Alden's blood ran cold as he read the item description. Chloroform. USP grade. 1 gallon. His heart felt like it was going to pound its way out of his chest. This was it. This was the proof. This was how you staged a bear attack without a struggle. With shaking hands, Alden printed the invoice and immediately called Maeve. He explained everything. The contract, his confrontation with Barrett, and the chemical purchase. Her voice, usually calm and measured, was tight with urgency. Alden, do not go back there. Call Sheriff Thompson right now, send him everything you found, and stay put. I'll call him too. The sheriff was skeptical at first, but the combination of Alden's evidence and a call from a state park ranger was enough to get his attention. He agreed to meet Alden and drive out to Barrett Finch's property. The drive was the longest of Alden's life. He sat in the passenger seat of the sheriff's cruiser, the invoice clutched in his hand. They pulled up to Barrett's farm, and the man himself came out of the house, his face a mask of annoyance that quickly morphed into fear when he saw the sheriff. Barrett, we have a few questions for you regarding the disappearance of Orville Freeman, Sheriff Thompson said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Alden watched as the color drained from Barrett's face. The sheriff presented the invoice. Can you explain why you purchased a gallon of chloroform 3 days before your main business rival disappeared? Barrett started to stammer, frantic, cornered energy about him. It's for cleaning equipment. It's a solvent. It's an anesthetic, Barrett, the sheriff said calmly. And we have a photo of Orville's veil found miles from his farm, completely undamaged. Barrett's composure finally cracked. His face crumpled, and the story came tumbling out in a torrent of pathetic excuses and self-pity. He had gone to Orville's farm to try and buy him out of the Harvest and Hearth deal. When Orville refused, they argued. Barrett hadn't planned to kill him, he claimed, but he'd brought the chloroform to use as a threat, to knock him out and scare him. In the heat of the moment, he'd used too much. Panicked, he dragged Orville's unconscious body into the woods. He smashed the hives to create the scene of a bear attack, knowing the local bears would eventually be drawn to the honey and would likely scavenge the body, destroying any evidence. He had tossed the veil aside as he fled, never imagining that a bear would pick it up so gently and carry it for miles, preserving the one piece of the puzzle that would eventually lead back to him. Following Barrett's confession, authorities recovered Orville's remains from a shallow grave deep in the woods. Alden was finally able to give his father a proper burial, not as the victim of a random animal attack, but as a man who was loved and would be missed. The silence at the farm didn't feel so heavy anymore. A few months later, Alden reopened the apiary. The buzzing returned, a gentle, healing sound that filled the air. He signed the contract with Harvest and Hearth, his father's name right next to his own. The Park Service returned the veil to him. He kept it in his father's old office, a strange, solemn reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of finding its way into the light. If you found yourself in Alden's position, do you think you could have let the official story stand for the sake of peace? Or does the truth, no matter how painful, always demand to be uncovered? There are so many cases where the smallest, most unlikely detail changes everything. If you don't want to miss our next investigation into the stories that lie just beneath the surface, make sure you're subscribed to our channel for more.